the slow drift that locks systems into place. Nothing breaks when systems drift. Nothing collapses. Nothing demands attention. And that is exactly why drift is so dangerous. This matters now because modern financial systems rarely fail through sudden mistakes. They fail by settling into patterns that feel comfortable, predictable, and justified until those patterns harden into structure. Drift does not shock the system. It numbs it, and because it numbs rather than shocks, it passes entirely beneath the threshold of urgency that would otherwise trigger a response. There is no moment when an alarm sounds. There is no catalyst that forces reconsideration. There's only the slow, silent settling of a system into a shape it was never explicitly chosen to hold. To understand drift, we need to stop looking for bad decisions. Drift is created by reasonable ones. Choices that make sense today, repeated tomorrow, then repeated again. No single step is wrong, but direction emerges anyway. And once direction forms, reversing becomes increasingly difficult. The reasonableness of each individual step is precisely what makes the cumulative direction so hard to challenge. Every defense of the status quo can point to the rationality of the choices that created it. London has witnessed this process across decades. The city has seen how incentives slowly align around what already exists. Capital flows toward familiarity. Risk models favor precedent. Innovation adapts to structure instead of challenging it. Over time, the system stops moving forward and starts settling into place. What once felt like deliberate strategy gradually becomes mere continuation, and continuation, repeated long enough, becomes something very close to destiny. At first, this feels like maturity. Volatility decreases. Outcomes stabilize. Confidence strengthens. But beneath that calm, motion is slowing. Flexibility is being traded for predictability. The system grows efficient, but rigid. Adaptation feels unnecessary until it becomes urgent. This is the first reveal. Systems rarely lock in through force. They lock in through drift. And once drift completes its work, the future feels fixed, not because it was chosen, but because it was allowed to settle without resistance. Drift strengthens because it feels invisible. There's no announcement when direction hardens. No clear moment when flexibility disappears. Instead, incentives adjust quietly. Processes optimize around what already works. Participants align with existing outcomes because deviation feels unnecessary. London understands how quickly this becomes structural. As drift continues, temporary solutions remain in place. Exceptions are extended. Workarounds become procedures. What was meant to adapt the system begins defining it. Each year, without interruption, reinforces the same alignment. Every time a workaround is extended rather than resolved, it lays another layer of permanence over what was meant to be provisional. This creates quiet lock-in. Capital prefers familiar routes. Risk avoids unfamiliar edges. Innovation reshapes itself to fit existing rules. The system is not resisting change aggressively. It is simply no longer built to accommodate it. New ideas must pass through old frameworks. Alternative paths feel impractical. Choice narrows not through prohibition, but through inconvenience. The cost of doing something different is not imposed by anyone. It emerges organically from a system that has organized itself around doing the same thing, and therefore offers no infrastructure for anything else. Drift also alters perception. What once felt adjustable now feels permanent. What once felt optional now feels necessary. What once felt temporary is no longer noticed at all. London has seen entire financial eras shaped this way, not by collapse or reform, but by slow settling. The system grows comfortable inside its own shape. Stability becomes identity rather than condition. And once identity forms, change feels like threat, because altering direction now risks disrupting too much at once. This is why drift is so powerful. It removes the moment when correction feels easy. And by the time urgency appears, the system is already locked into place. The conflict emerges when drift begins limiting response. As conditions outside the system evolve, the structure inside remains unchanged. New challenges appear that do not fit existing assumptions. New opportunities require flexibility the system no longer has. Yet adjustment feels disruptive, even dangerous. London recognizes this moment clearly. Drift has converted preference into dependency. Participants rely on familiar pathways because alternatives feel incompatible. Institutions defend existing frameworks not because they are optimal, but because too much depends on them. The system resists change by default. This creates hidden strain. Signals that contradict the prevailing direction are softened. Warnings are reframed as anomalies. Pressure is absorbed locally instead of addressed systemically. The system still functions, but with growing tension, it responds slowly. Adaptation becomes reactive rather than proactive. Each misadjustment increases the cost of the next one. Drift turns flexibility into fragility, and fragility hidden inside an otherwise functioning system is more dangerous than visible weakness, because it is not recognized until it is tested directly. This is the critical conflict, because systems shaped by drift do not fail suddenly. They struggle quietly. They miss transitions. They lag innovation. They respond too late. London understands that this is the most dangerous phase, not because collapse is imminent, but because correction still feels optional. The system can continue operating, just increasingly out of sync with its environment. And the longer this misalignment persists, the more painful realignment becomes. Drift does not announce its damage. It reveals it only when change is no longer gentle. The climax arrives when drift finally runs out of room. A moment comes when the system can no longer adjust quietly. External conditions move too far. Internal structures strain. What once felt stable now feels slow. What once felt predictable now feels inadequate. Drift has reached its limit. London understands this reckoning well. When systems lock into place, resolution cannot come from minor adjustments. Recalibration must be intentional. Assumptions are questioned. Defaults are revisited. Some structures are loosened, others dismantled. The goal is not to erase the past, but to restore movement. This is the resolution of drift. Not reversal, but release. The system relearns how to bend. Flexibility is reintroduced deliberately. Space is made for deviation. Adaptation becomes possible again, not because conditions improved, but because rigidity was addressed. The lesson is unforgiving. Drift is never neutral. Comfort is never free. And stability that cannot move will eventually be forced to. London's enduring strength has been recognizing drift before it becomes destiny. Acting while adjustment is still possible. And understanding that systems must choose movement intentionally or be moved by circumstances they no longer control. Because when drift locks systems into place, the future stops being shaped. It starts being imposed. Subscribe to join the journey. The most disarming quality of drift is that it never looks like the problem it eventually becomes. During the years of accumulation, drift looks like maturity. It looks like an organization that has learned from experience and settled into reliable patterns. It looks like a market that has found its equilibrium. It looks like a system that has earned the right to function without constant questioning. And in each of these descriptions, there is a grain of truth. Drift does represent a kind of learning. The problem is that learning can calcify. The patterns learned in one environment become liabilities when the environment changes. And drift ensures that the system holds onto those patterns long past the point where releasing them will be both possible and beneficial. This is why recognizing drift requires a particular kind of attention, one that is suspicious of comfort rather than reassured by it. The institution that scrutinizes its own functioning most carefully during periods of apparent success, that asks whether its current patterns are genuinely optimal or merely familiar, that create internal friction precisely because external friction has disappeared, is the institution best positioned to avoid the worst consequences of drift. It is not easy to maintain this scrutiny. The absence of problems is a powerful signal that no scrutiny is needed, but the absence of visible problems is precisely the condition under which drift advances most effectively. London has built its financial identity partly around this discipline. The willingness to ask, even during periods of apparent strength, whether the system is drifting toward a shape it will not be able to escape. It is an uncomfortable question that rarely generates immediate reward, but it is the question that determines, across decades, whether a system remains capable of choosing its own future or whether it arrives, one imperceptible step at a time, at a future it never chose but can no longer avoid. The